Alright, so my first plan is to make a grid on my canvas. You'll be using a sheet of watercolor paper. So if you followed my first video to make the grid, we've already edited the photo. My grid is 3 by 4 boxes, so 12 total. And I'm using each box to plot out in pencil my chosen image. So I'm just working with a line drawing, trying to get the proper proportions that match my photo. So I'm using a lot of gestural drawing, meaning that I'm not spending a lot of time focusing on the pencil. Like, this is not a drawing, it's a painting. So these lines are just to help me reference scale and proportion and size of everything on my canvas. You will have time to go over if the pencil is inaccurate, and you can always paint over mistakes later. So this is just a very rough draft of what your official painting is going to look like. You still want to spend time on your painting, and you still want to get this accurate. But as you can see, I'm referencing my photo very often. And actually, I have 2 photos, one with the grid and one without. Because I like sometimes using the reference without the grid, so I can see the values and details underneath the lines. So if you want to have that as an option, just save one version of your picture without a grid. So for my day in the life, I chose a picture of my husband and our dog. Because this is sort of how I've been spending my time in quarantine, is bonding with, obviously my husband and our dog together. Our dog is loving quarantine with us. So I thought this picture was super cute. It has, movies in the background that we've been watching, a lot of movies, and in our house, which we just moved into last year. So it's very relevant for me during this time. So I encourage you to think about your day in the life, what you see every day. All right, so now what I'm doing is, after my line work, I'm doing a technique called underpainting. So my complementary color scheme that I chose was orange and blue, and I'm going to use the neutral color scheme eventually to add value to my completed painting. But the technique that I'm using, called underpainting, is choosing one of those colors, either orange or blue, to act as a color underneath those final colors. So I'm using a watered down version of the blue from my color scheme, and I'm painting what is considered like a second rough draft. So I've already drawn out the lines, but now I want to paint some of those initial primary values. And I'm not adding white or black. Also, my cat makes some appearances in this video. I apologize. She wants to drink the water. So I'm not adding white or black to add value. I'm watering down the acrylic like it were watercolor. And I'm using a variety of brushes that I would use in my final painting to get some of those finer details. So this is like a practice version of your painting. Some people find it unnecessary or extra work, but it really adds depth of color to your overall painting. And for me, it's a really nice reference to help me practice value, which I'm going to add later. So this is a difficult painting. This is a difficult composition with lots of different colors. So I want to make sure that I'm getting all those colors and doing it accurately. I'm watering down paint, like I said, like I would watercolor or gouache. And then going over with different brushes and then pure acrylic to darken those things up. This is also another way to edit your painting. So if you find like, oh, I'm adding value to this and the proportions seem off, you haven't added a ton of paint to your canvas or your paper yet, so it's really not chunky and not textured, and you're not overlapping so much paint it's hard to get through. So underpainting has a lot of different benefits to your painting. You should take breaks. I take about 3 breaks during this time, and underpainting can be a task where you get sort of tired because you know that you're not to the final painting yet. But stick through it. Spend a lot of time getting those various values and it will pay off. So with my painting, I started from the background and then went into the foreground. So I'm working on the parts again like I did with my self-portrait, where it's just sort of added. It's not the focal point. It's probably not the most exciting part to paint. But overall, it's going to benefit for me to do those things first. So starting from the background and then going to the foreground, I don't have to worry so much about going over my focal point and messing it up, or having to repaint a part that I spent a lot of time on that I really love because I had to do the background. So I went from all the way in the background by the window, then to the movies on the shelf, sort of the couch, and now I'm working on the jeans. And you're going to notice that your paint is going to run a lot, especially if you're using an easel like me. But don't worry about it because your surface is going to absorb a lot of that water. And again, you're going to go over this with thicker applications of acrylic, so you're not going to see a ton of this. I like to use detail brushes for finer lines in the clothing and the wrinkles. And again, you want to have a variety of flat and round brushes depending on what you're painting. So a lot of the details in the legs themselves are rounded because the legs are round and three-dimensional, but then the pants are linear, so I'm kind of going back and forth. And then from the pants, I go to the shirt, starting from the left side of the canvas and towards the right. I'm saving the faces of the dog and my husband for last, because I know that those are going to need a lot of my attention. I want to make sure that I'm getting that rendering of their faces correct so it actually looks like them. In your painting, if you don't have a subject that's a person or an animal or anything like that, it could be kind of difficult to understand what the focal point is. But think about what's the most important part of your painting, the part that your eye is going to go to first. And that's maybe the part that you should spend the most time on and try to render so it is recognizable. If your painting doesn't have a focal point, maybe you need to make one. Maybe you need to focus on cropping the picture a little bit differently, or choosing a photograph that means a little bit more to you. As long as you have realism in your painting and it is representative of a day in your life, you should be in good shape. Another thing about this underpainting is I'm not trying to get as much detail as I would in the final painting. I am trying to replicate value and get that color, but I don't want to overextend all my energy on this underpainting. So I'm going very carefully into the face, starting with a smaller detail brush, focusing on shadows and texture. My husband's face is at a pretty difficult angle. You only see part of his eye, you don't see a ton of detail, so I don't want to make it look like a monster or an alien, and I just want to render it enough that it is recognizable. And now I'm going towards the dog, focusing on the various parts of her. So don't judge yourself too harshly by this underpainting. Obviously you want to try, and obviously you want a good painting, but just know that it's going to get better as you continue practicing and as you figure out your material and your medium. The biggest part of this that you need to consider is that your underpainting needs to dry before you start to add the final layers of paint. So I am going to take a big break after this underpainting and let it dry for a full day. So this painting is definitely going to take you a couple days. This painting took me about an hour and a half total. So give yourself some time to work on it and work through those problems. All right, look for part 2 for adding the real color.